You're listening to a Roddenberry Podcast.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. And now for a brand new show we hope you'll like. Gene-ology, a Roddenberry Podcast.
Episode 66, Incident of the Magic Elixir. Welcome to Mission Log Gene-ology. I'm Earl Green.
And I'm Ashley Thomas.
Each week on Mission Log Gene-ology, we take a look back at Gene Roddenberry's early TV writing to check for hints of the ingredients for his signature concoction of morals, meanings, and messages that eventually made their way into his own personal magic elixir, Star Trek.
Ingredients for Gene-ology have not been FDA approved, are not certified organic, may not be non-GMO, and may contain allergens not listed here. Ingredients for Gene-ology may also be considered spicy and may contain extremely hot takes. Please use caution while listening to Gene-ology.
Please take it minimum once per week, but repeat the dosage as necessary. There is no maximum dosage for Gene-ology. Side effects for Gene-ology may include, but are not limited to, giggling, tangents, puns, and the occasional soapbox rant. Please ask your doctor and your mom if Mission Log Gene-ology is right for you. Now, with all the warnings out of the way, before we get to trivia on this week's episode, let me take a brief moment to encourage you to join our Patreon or follow us on YouTube or leave a review wherever you're listening to us. Patreon is your gateway to all things Mission Log, including exclusive access to the unedited version of our show, aka The VAM, and our private Discord where you can interact with us, your hosts, during scheduled live chats and occasional screenings. You can access all of this for just $1 a month, although nobody's going to kick you out of bed if you decide to pitch in more. So head over to patreon.com/missionlog to see what tier works for you and join the conversation. By the way, reviews help our shows more than you know, even if you can't come up with the words. And yeah, I get it. Words. Braining is hard. If you can't come up with words for a written review, a 5-star rating goes a long way to informing the algorithm that we're hella cool over here, and other people might dig us too. We're counting on our loyal genealogists to spread the word, and by the way, thank you for all of you who have submitted written reviews. Those are extremely validating. Stand by for validation. And now, this week's trivia. Ashley, it's you this time.
It's me. Folks, we are a little light in the trivia department this week. The biggest point of trivia concerning Incident of the Magic Elixir is that it never made it to air, or even to production. The script was written by Edward J. Lakso, or should we say Lasco, as he was credited as both throughout his career, according to Internet Movie Database. I have no idea if this was a typo or he just started, changing up the spelling. Unclear. Edward had a long career in Hollywood as a writer and occasionally got to sit in the director's chair and wear a producer's hat as well. Contemporaneous with his work on Wrangler, he also contributed scripts for Zangray Theater, Perry Mason, The Deputy, My Three Sons, Laramie, and Rawhide. He was also one of the main writers on Combat, where he penned nearly a third of the episodes for the show for a grand total of 33 from 1963 to 1967. He would work again with Gene on Star Trek The Original Series, writing the Season 3 episode And the Children Shall Lead in 1968. He would also contribute scripts to numerous other shows throughout the 60s and 70s, including The Wild Wild West, The Rat Patrol, Hawaii Five-0, The Virginian, 13 episodes of The Mod Squad, Adam 12, The $6 Million Man, Mannix, The Planet of the Apes TV series, The Rockford Files, and Starsky and Hutch. In the 80s, he contributed scripts for the Back to the Planet of the Apes TV movie, The Fall Guy, and Airwolf. As a film writer and director, Edward also worked on the films Head On, 43, The Richard Petty Story, and Brother on the Run. He's also credited as the composer for 43, The Richard Petty Story. However, Edward's largest contribution to television history was his work on Charlie's Angels. He is credited with 51 episodes of the series from 1976 to 1981 in a writing capacity. He also had a producer credit for 47 episodes of that series. Edward retired from Hollywood in 1986. We lost Edward J. Lakso to Parkinson's disease in 2009.
Jonathan, you gone completely out of your head.
What?
You can't let those people do this. You gotta tell them the truth.
The truth? Dickhead, don't you see? It was the water. The water from that old well. It must have been some special mineral. That's what did it.
The water. Jonathan, wake up. That kid was scared into thinking she was paralyzed. Somehow we unscared her, and I'm thankful. But you can't cure people who are really sick.
How do you know, Pitcairn? How do you know we haven't stumbled upon the elixir of life?
Because there is no such thing. Look, Jonathan, I was broke and I was hungry. I figured selling prune moonshine at $2 a bottle wasn't that big a sin. But this is playing with human lives.
Pitcairn, maybe you don't believe in miracles, but I do. All my life I've been a nobody. A freak. Something to laugh at. Well, now that has all changed, I am going to be somebody.
Maybe you believe that, Jonathan. Maybe you don't. Either way, I'll stop you.
Pitcairn is an American cowboy who rides the late 1800s western frontier, helping people in need. With a carbine in his saddle boot, Pitcairn and his horse Sam look for work and adventure in the Wild West. Prologue. Summer, 1869. Wyoming is experiencing a dry spell. To make matters worse, Sam the horse has taken a bad spill, and that leaves Pitcairn with the equivalent of an 1869 flat tire. He and Sam are taking a leisurely limp through the prairie when the sound of gunfire breaks out in the distance. 2 Kiowa Indians mounted on ponies are circling a wagon, yelling and firing the occasional shot across the wagon. Someone from within is firing back, but quite badly. Pitcairn runs to assist down the slope, rifle up and ready, hoping to help the bad shot in the wagon. Act 1. Jonathan Meeker, a large, disheveled, vociferous man, is hiding among his mixing paddles and bottles at his camp, aiming an antique rifle at his assailants. The rifle jams and backfires, knocking him back, sputtering into the dust. The Kiowa Indians notice this and ride harder towards Meeker. But these aren't the braves you'd expect to be on the attack. These are older men, well past their prime. One is even a little blind. Pitcairn fires a shot in their general direction, not aimed to hit, but to frighten and deter. This knocks the half-blind one off his pony, while his fellow starts to turn his mount around, riding to get out of dodge. Pitcairn watches as the two ride away. Meeker thanks Pitcairn for his assistance, and the men introduce themselves. Pitcairn inquires as to why the Kiowa men were shooting at him. Meeker explains that it's because he sold them some alcohol, more specifically his Magic Elixir, which is composed of prune juice and neutral spirits, a warrior's drink. Pitcairn reads the label. Immediate relief for chiggers, gallstones, arthritis, pneumonia. How about a lame cow pony? But no dice. But there should be a vet in the next town, Meeker says. But vets, they cost money, and Pitcairn's a bit short. Meeker has a solution. How about you be my pitchman in the next town? I'll cut you in for 10%. Pitcairn is a master bargainer, though. He knows what's really in Uncle Jonathan's Magic Elixir, and isn't afraid to tell the whole town. It's 50%, or Meeker's out of luck. Meeker reluctantly agrees, and they shake on it. Meeker and Pitcairn are making their way to town in the wagon, with Sam limping along beside them. Meeker pulls over to an abandoned well and draws a tin bucket from the wagon. He complains that he's got to dilute his Magic Elixir if he's to turn a profit due to Pitcairn's bargaining shenanigans. Pitcairn looks on bemusedly. Rolling into town, Meeker sets up in a likely spot on the main thoroughfare. A young boy enters the scene, and Meeker offers him a coin to take Sam to the town veterinarian. As the young boy leads Sam away, a crowd starts to gather, checking out the wagon. Meeker sets up his display of bottles as the crowd grows, moving in closer. Meeker goes into full salesman mode with the bravado of a carnival barker. While Meeker extols the virtues of his magic elixir, which he developed while being a professor at Harvard, by the way. That's a college, you know. A burly man from the crowd questions him on its effects. What's it good for? Well, everything, obviously. It'll cure what ails you, friend. What's the nature of your affliction? Well, the burly man would rather not say. Totally get that. The good news is that the magic elixir sells for a measly $2 a bottle. The crowd clutches their collective pearls like a church lady who just heard a swear word. It's a little rich for their blood until Meeker offers a demonstration. He lifts a tarp to reveal Pitcairn. Meeker describes encountering Pitcairn, beaten and stumbling around the prairie alongside his limping horse. Pitcairn is strewn against the pile of junk, looking disheveled and worse for wear. Meeker asks a couple of men to help Pitcairn up, but he's unable to stand. The men drag him toward the crowd. By way of demonstration, Meeker administers a dose of his magic elixir to Pitcairn, and by a dose he means half a bottle. Pitcairn coughs and sputters, but with an Oscar-winning dramatic performance rises to his full height. Meeker gives him a few soft slaps across the face, telling him to come to. Pitcairn asks what happened, and Meeker explains he's been brought back to the land of the living. Behold! This demonstration should be all anyone needs to buy a bottle of Uncle Jonathan's magic elixir, right? Wrong. The burly man from the crowd objects. How do they know Pitcairn's not faking it? Well, just test him, says Meeker. And with this, the burly man lands a punch to Pitcairn's jaw, sending him flying to the ground. Pitcairn shoots Meeker a look, but what can he do? Pitcairn starts to get up, but the burly fellow knocks him back to the ground. Pitcairn's calculating his next move, sidestepping him and landing a punch to the breadbasket. The burly fellow doubles over in pain, and with that, Pitcairn lands a haymaker punch to the man's face, sending him smashing into the wagon. The man's nose is bleeding, but he's still clutching his stomach. Pitcairn blocks his next swing and sends the man to kiss the dirt with another haymaker. The burly man is down for the count and out cold. And with that, the crowd surges forward, buying up Meeker's stock. Pitcairn staggers away to take a breather from the crowd. That's when he notices a small child and her mother. The child, Sally Coleman, is asking her mother, Helen Coleman, if they can purchase a bottle of the magic elixir. After all, it made that man well. Sally is wrapped in a light blanket, completely supported by her mother, seated on a buckboard. Helen says no, but Sally persists, insisting that if it is magic, it could... But her mother cuts her off and fires a look at Pitcairn, as Sally looks about to cry. Pitcairn steps in. Helen bitterly tells Pitcairn how her daughter was impressed with his recovery, but she doesn't want to give her false hope. Pitcairn takes pity on the mother and daughter. He introduces himself properly and offers to give Sally a bottle of the elixir, as long as it's okay with Helen. After all, you can't buy hope, so this is one on him. Sally invites Pitcairn back to the house for dinner. Helen is a little sheepish about the invitation, but as long as Pitcairn doesn't have anything else planned. Back at the Coleman house, Pitcairn and Helen are standing out on the porch, taking in the chilly evening. Helen mentions that she had to hide the bottle in the dresser drawer. The moonlight kept catching it and giving it a bit of a halo. Sally couldn't take her eyes off of it. Pitcairn entreats Helen. What happened to paralyzed Sally? Where is Helen's husband? That's a tough story. Helen's husband had went out to do some chores. When he didn't come back, she sent Sally out after him. Sally found her father attacked by 3 drunken Kiowa braves. Sally ran inside to get her mother, but by the time Helen got out there with the gun, Sally followed her and saw her father. Sally went into hysterics. The next morning, Sally was totally paralyzed. Pitcairn takes Helen's hand in sympathy. Helen considers her feelings, but tells Pitcairn that when she lost her husband, everything just sort of tied up inside her. Let's leave it that way. Pitcairn starts to move towards her to take her into his arms, but instead just takes her hand and wishes her good night. Pitcairn strides off the porch toward the barn as Helen watches him leave, torn between attraction and futility. Pitcairn's asleep on some hay in the barn with Sam and his newly bandaged foot nearby. They awaken to the sound of shouts and running outside. A man's running outside toward the other side of the street. Pitcairn runs to follow to see what the commotion is. Sally Coleman is up and walking down the street. Act 2. Citizens are running out of the hotel and their homes to see the unexpected sight. Sally is still walking, albeit a little shakily, down the street, her mother and some of the crowd following her. Sally's moves are none too steady due to ill-used muscles these past 6 months, but she reassures her mother, "It's okay. I can really walk. The elixir really was magic." This proclamation is met with shock, but Helen confirms. She did, in fact, give Sally some of the elixir, but only a little. She woke up late last night to ask for it, and now Sally's up walking around. Helen picks up Sally and makes her way hurriedly back to the house. The burly fellow moves towards Meeker. It's true. All of it. Meeker is as stunned as everyone else, but, why, yes, it is. The crowd starts telling Meeker of all of their sick, infirm, and elderly and disabled relatives. Do you have any more? Meeker assures him that he can make some more of his magic elixir and starts off to do just that. That is until Pitcairn stops him. What in the HE double hockey sticks do you think you're doing, Meeker? You know good and well that this stuff just can't cure these people. But Meeker argues. It must be the added ingredient of the water from the old well. It's got to have a special mineral or something. A few yards off, Helen comes out of her house, listening. Pitcairn urges Meeker. Sally got scared into her condition, and somehow she got unscared out of it. Selling these people a false cure will do no one any favors. Meeker continues to argue his point, but Pitcairn won't hear it. He only took the job because he figured selling his prune shine to some folks for $2 a bottle wasn't that big of a sin, but now Meeker's playing with people's lives, and Pitcairn doesn't want any part of it. Meeker refuses to hear him, insisting that this is finally his chance to be somebody of importance. And with that, Meeker pulls some bills out of his pocket and throws them on the ground in front of Pitcairn. That's snake oil salesman for GTFO. Pitcairn turns to beseech Helen for help, but Helen's now wondering about the mineral water. Could that have really done the trick? Pitcairn is incredulous. He can almost understand Meeker believing his own nonsense, but Helen? Helen then tells him why. Sally can walk again. If Sally thinks it's because there's some magic in that bottle, then no one is going to tell her otherwise. When Pitcairn objects, Helen insists that she has no idea what happened other than that her daughter is no longer a cripple and she'll do anything to keep her that way. And with that, she strides off. Pitcairn looks down at the cash on the ground and moves toward the stable. Later, Meeker has a table set up on the porch of the hotel. He's gotten a haircut and picked up some new fancy duds and a very fine hat. He's extolling the virtues of his magic elixir, now at a $25 a bottle premium. But Sally's morning stroll is advertisement enough. The crowds are moving in. "Hold it!" shouts Pitcairn. Meeker is expecting Pitcairn to spill the beans on him, but it's too bad. They believe in miracles too, Pitcairn, and he's found the real elixir of life. Pitcairn isn't too concerned, though. He hands a sheet of paper to Meeker and asks that he read it aloud. "Be it known that on this day, April 12, 1864, a one Mr. Pitcairn did lawfully and legally homestead an area of land 8 by 8 feet around the perimeter of an abandoned well, 1 7/8 miles from the city limit of Cold Iron, Wyoming. Be it further known..." But Meeker is now cautious and concerned. What do you plan to do? Pitcairn speculates that one of them big Eastern concerns might pay pretty handsomely for his magic well. Helen is watching all the while, a bit confused. Pitcairn begins to make his exit when he's stopped by 2 men, the sons of an elderly woman who'd come to get some of Uncle Jonathan's magic elixir. Their mother comes 60 miles to get treated, can't walk, and it's painful for her to even eat. The men tell him that he'd better tear up that homestead, or else. Well, Pitcairn soon finds out what they mean by "or else" and gives him a good walloping. He does eventually gain the upper hand, grabbing his rifle and cocking it into place. The crowd freezes. Anyone else? But Meeker starts to plead with Pitcairn. They were partners. Those big Eastern concerns will rob him blind. In fact, hey, Meeker's got $1,100 in cash. He'll buy the well directly. What do you say? Pitcairn's not sure until Meeker offers him half interest on the deal. How now? All right, deal. Meeker, relieved, starts to go back to his work when Pitcairn interrupts. Oh, BT dubs, that water in the well? Turns out it's just like any other water around here, or any other state for that matter. Plain, ordinary water. He had the local water surveyor check it out to confirm. But that wasn't all he's checked out. He ran tests on your elixir, too. Turns out all it is really just a warrior's drink after all. Prune juice and moonshine, a.k.a. pruneshine. Meeker is stunned at his revelation, and the crowd is furious. But before they can raise a hand against Meeker, Pitcairn stops them. He says, it appears to me that fools who believe in miracles that come in bottles are just as much a fool as the fool who thinks he's selling them. Dang, can Uncle Jonathan's magic elixir fix that sick burn? He continues, the only thing that made Sally walk again was her wanting to walk again. Bad enough. And maybe that's the only magic a person can really count on. Pitcairn hands Meeker back his money and tells him to give him back the deed. Pitcairn then rides back toward the stable to get Sam. While he does this, the second piece of paper falls to the ground. Helen picks it up. It's blank. She smiles in Pitcairn's general direction as he rides off. Act 3. Pitcairn is letting Sam drink. The medicine wagon, driven by Meeker, is approaching. He's back to his old clothes, fancy duds sold off to pay his debts. Meeker tells Pitcairn that he ran off so fast he didn't have a chance to, apologize. They could still be partners, just on a more modest scale. Pitcairn replies, well, a man can be a modest worker or a modest lover, but just how does one be a modest thief? Rich living gave Meeker a stomachache, he says. Pitcairn suggests sucking on some beef jerky. That always helps. Meeker then thinks further. What if I soaked some beef jerky in rum or something? Might cure what ails ya. He starts to ask Pitcairn's opinion, but Pitcairn and Sam are already trying to get out of Cold Iron, Wyoming. He's got no imagination, mutters Jonathan. The end.
Ashley, excellent recap. As always, you are healed. Rise up.
Yeah. And I believe I've shared this on the show before, but my dad's side of the family were moonshiners during Prohibition. So the idea of pruneshine in this story, one, a warrior's drink, but two, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I've got some thoughts on that subject in here. I will say for the record that you had to say pruneshine a second time for me to realize, no, that is what she said. I was sitting over here, like, did I hear that correctly?
Pruneshine was not a word used in the actual script, just in case anybody was excited or concerned about that. But
you see, this is
what came to my head at about 3 a.m.
This is what Sheriff Worf does in the holodeck program when Deputy Alexander has gone to bed. He whips up a batch of pruneshine.
Pruneshine, a warrior's drink. Also, it's like soon as prunes are mentioned, nope, gotta say it.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, it's obligatory.
It's the law.
One thing about this script makes me very sad. It's Sam. Speak to me, buddy.
Oh, man. As soon as I saw that Sam was limping, I was like, Earl's going to cry on the podcast.
Yeah. Sam has emerged as my favorite thing about Wrangler. So I found it irrationally upsetting that he might have to sit out the rest of the season due to an injury.
Yeah.
And really, no joking here. Hurt Sam makes me very sad because I've been around injured horses before. And you just see it in their eyes. You can hear it in how they're breathing, the rhythm of their breath, that it hurts.
Yeah.
So I felt terrible for poor Sam.
I did as well. Poor guy. It was nothing sadder than watching a horse limp. Because, I mean, so much of a horse is like their walk and their legs, and, you know, watching one limp, it's so sad. It hurts my heart, too.
Yeah, especially since they really have two natural positions, which is laying down or walking or standing. You know, I lump walking and standing into the same category, but they sometimes fall asleep on their feet. I mean, that's a very... So, you know, even one injured leg, that's bad news.
Right. Poor guy.
Now, speaking of horses, Edward Lakso's script, the script directions, stage directions, keep referring to ponies. Maybe because I have a background of dealing with horses, I know that has a specific definition.
Right.
Here they seem to be using it interchangeably with horse, but I'm sitting over here like, y'all run out of full-scale horses this week? Was it just not in the budget? Sam a foot shorter than he was last week?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I mean, I would assume the term cow pony is a little bit lax or more casual, but yeah, but describing the Kiowas as mounted on ponies, it makes them sound less threatening than if they were mounted on horses.
Yeah, it makes it sound like they're trying to be threatening on the backs of miniature horses. Ah!
Yeah.
We'll get you, Meeker!
Yeah, riding atop Little Sebastian from Parks and Rec. Bye, bye, Little Sebastian. These poor braves, like the one guy, like these guys are like not well past their prime. The one guy's half blind. I've got thoughts on that, Earl, but you go ahead and tell some more observations before I'm going to go on an observation soapbox.
Well, I may be borrowing your observation soapbox before you use it here, because Pitcairn having to drive off these Braves feels so generic and really out of place in Wrangler.
Yeah.
Wrangler hasn't done women any huge favors. Mm-hmm. You know, it gives us strong women, and then it gives us men who want to undermine them.
Right.
Not a great look. But what it has been good at is Native American representation.
Right.
You know, we have had Tall Hat, and we've had Big Tree, and we've had Monacita and Ouray. And these are Native American characters with some depth and some dignity, even if they weren't necessarily friendly to our main character.
Right.
Pitcairn has played cards with them and respected them and has not been a colonizing jerk. When he is occupying their space, he is very respectful of them. He's not like, hey, all this is going to be mine someday. You know, he's not like Cunningham in A Time for Hanging saying, oh, you want to let it go back to the Apaches out here? That's why we have to hang people. Really? Okay. So this felt like a big step backward to me. Did you clock that as well?
Yes, I did. I had a little bit of whiplash, even just in the prologue and the very early parts of Act 1 in this script. The whiplash of prune juice and neutral spirits. First, as a Star Trek fan, I'm laughing. A warrior's drink. Ha ha ha. But wait a minute. How are we supposed to read the line from Meeker? You know, when Pitcairn asks, why were these guys after you? He said, alcohol. I made the mistake of selling them some of my elixir, which is composed of equal parts wholesome prune juice and aforesaid neutral spirits. Now, is Meeker leaning into the stereotype of indigenous alcoholism? Are they after him because he promised his elixir would cure blindness or give them strength? Or is it that the half-blind one is in that state because Meeker took the wrong cut of neutral spirit and mixed it with his prune juice?
Oh, I had not thought of that.
There is a local distillery over here that I like to frequent called Southern Grace Distilling. I've done the tour several times, and one of the things they show you is how they do the different cuts of alcohol, like before it goes into the barrel to age. And the first cut is what they use to clean the countertops at the distillery. You put it in a spray bottle. That's some really good countertop cleaner. But if you drink that, that's what they say will make you go blind. I'm not going to get the technical terms right, so I'm not even going to pretend that I know exactly what I'm talking about with this. But you do certain cuts of alcohol, or from the whiskey as it's distilling, until it's right. I mean, but basically, if he takes the wrong cut and he mixes it with this prune juice, like, is he giving something that can cause blindness? Or is he really, I wasn't clear on how to read this. Like, because it felt like he's saying, oh, they're just after because, are they after me because of the alcohol? Leaning it. And then you have later in the script where we find out what happened to Mr. Coleman, who was killed by these 3 drunken Kiowa Braves.
Yeah, it seems like they're mentioning alcohol in proximity to the Native American characters every time in this episode.
Literally every time.
That's a good catch. I did not pick up on that until you brought it to my attention.
Yeah, I missed it the first time around. And then as I was writing the recap, I'm like, wait a minute. What's actually happening here? And so, based on the fact that Pitcairn didn't go blind when he got half a bottle of this stuff poured down his throat, my thought is they're trying, like the Lakso is trying to lean into this idea of, oh yeah, these Kiowas are just a bunch of drunks. And that makes me mad.
There's a lot of stuff in here, and I don't want to jump straight to the end of our show. I don't feel like Lakso read the sample scripts for Wrangler, because this feels very generic Western. It does not feel like Wrangler. Not all of Wrangler that we have read so far has been great, and we have called that out when applicable. But this was very troublesome.
Yeah.
Here's another thing that really bugged me, and this goes back to my theory that the writer did not understand the format of the show. Pitcairn is just going full on Ferengi and pitching in his lot with Jonathan.
Right. Like, that was really weird. Like, oh, you can be my pitch man. Like,
yeah.
What on Pitcairn's resume would anyone believe that he could be a good pitch man? He's a wrangler. He wrangles. And even in, like, the 2-second meeting between him and Meeker, all he did was, scare off some Kiowas. Like, how is that qualification for a pitch meeting?
Well, Meeker evidently heard something about Pitcairn's exploits at the Bar M, where he was great at everything, so, why not?
Oh, yeah,
why not be a pitch
that's right.
man?
That's right. They must have edited out the line where Pitcairn says, I'm Pitcairn Gary Stu the Wrangler. So, geez. Yeah.
Yeah, the script specifically says Sam needs the attention of a qualified vet, and that Pitcairn is flat broke again. That's the second time that would have happened in 8 episodes had Wrangler gotten its full run, but this one was never filmed.
Right.
But Pitcairn does not seem to wrestle with this ethical decision at all.
No.
And that seems extremely out of character for Gene Roddenberry's formulation of Pitcairn.
Yeah, I agree. And, Pitcairn says, well, later in the script, I took it because I was broke, out of money. Didn't seem like that big of a deal. But now you are making this a really big deal for me. I get being in the position where, you really need a job and you're stuck doing a job that you would rather not do or might have some ethical conundrum where, like, it's not ideal, but you don't feel bad enough about it that you're willing to change until, oh, snap, this is actually worse than I thought it was.
I mean, okay, we've had Pitcairn saying outrageously sexist things. We've heard him say a few truly profound things as well. But generally speaking, we have seen the character make every effort to be on the side of right and to live by his own personal code of honor. This is the guy who promised to get Monacita back to her people. This is the guy who made sure Flo and Enlo got together and made sure Waveland married the right guy. his actions have mostly been commendable. If occasionally he had to say terrible things to achieve the desired result, but here he is just being a straight-up con man, and it does not fit with the character we've been riding along with these past several weeks.
Yeah, would agree. This Pitcairn did not sit right with me. He didn't square with the rest of Pitcairn that we've seen in 7 other scripts.
There are many places in the script, I don't know if you noticed this, Jonathan's name seems to be misaligned compared to the rest of that line of stage directions.
Yeah.
I wonder what this character's original name was, because I think changes were made, and just to check, just to satisfy my own curiosity, I did some digging and found out liquid paper was a thing prior to 1960.
Okay.
It was very much a small family business at the time, and it was being run and sold by Betty Nesmith Graham, whose son Michael would grow up to become the guitarist for the Monkees.
People say they monkey around.
Yeah, but liquid paper, in theory, would have been available in 1960, and given how much scripts have to be revised in ways both large and small, yeah, I think Hollywood in general would be a very early adopter of that product.
Yeah, no, that would make a lot of sense, for sure. I really didn't like how we test out the claims of the prune shine. Big burly guy, like, oh, well, here, let's see if this works. Punch. This is how we know this works, is I can beat this guy up.
You know, this is not approved clinical testing, although I low-key love that there's a character who is simply identified throughout the script as Burly Fellow.
Yes, Burly Fellow. Couldn't even give him a name like, I don't know, Sven.
Burly Burleson. I mean, you know, cue the Burly Brawl from The Matrix Reloaded, and that is a whole different fight with Pitcairn.
Right.
That's a fancy fight.
Heck yeah.
Whoa. But yeah, that seemed like a less than scientific way. You know, oh, he's feeling better? Let's see if I can fix that.
Right. I did notice something interesting while I was writing the recap that I missed in my initial read. The burly fellow does not want to elaborate on what ails him. Pitcairn lands a punch to the stomach and then a punch to the face. The guy's nose is bleeding when he comes back at Pitcairn, but he seems a lot more concerned with the stomach. I think this guy had a little bit of an upset tum-tum. He had one bad burrito too many and had an unfortunate trip to the outhouse. That's kind of what I'm thinking. How about you?
Yeah, that happened during the commercial break.
Right.
But I can totally sympathize. $2 a bottle? Whew.
That's pretty steep for 1860s time.
Yeah, so adjusted for inflation to the year we are recording this podcast, that bottle is $46.41, and it is probably not covered by your copay.
Probably not. And that better be some... it sounds like it probably is some high-proof prune shine for it to be, worth a $46 bottle. So this is something very, very silly, but this is how my brain works. When Meeker is describing Uncle Jonathan's magic elixir as a secret solution of herbs and spices, that's literally the description for Dr. Pepper.
I was thinking Kentucky Fried Chicken, the 11 secret herbs and spices.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, you're right about that, too. That's a good point. So, we're having some Dr. Pepper KFC prune shine. Got it. That's a full meal right there.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's the drive-thru special for 1869.
1869. There was another interesting thing I picked up on. Pitcairn's log, if you will, beginning of the script, says it's summer 1869. Well, towards the end of the script, when Pitcairn reveals that he owns the well, the date on that is April 1864. So, are we supposed to think that Pitcairn has somehow been to this area before, decided, I'm going to purchase and homestead this well? Like literally an 8-foot by 8-foot thing. He did that some 5 years prior. and now is back. Oh, BT dubs, that's my will. Or are we just supposed to assume this is a typo?
I think it's either a typo or maybe he has altered the paper, or, the paper may not have had anything on it, because we get that at the end too. So what was Meeker reading in that public meeting?
Well, I think it was the second piece of paper that was blank, which was...
Oh, the one that the guys were trying to beat him up and get away from him.
About the... by the way, that's just regular old water. The deed of ownership seems like that was a legit thing, plus Meeker was reading it, but the dates were 5 years off, so I couldn't figure out if that was just a typo or if we're led to believe that Pitcairn has been wandering around the West for 5 years, and decided, I'm just going to buy this 8 by 8 foot plot of land with a well on it. That's what I'm going to homestead.
Well, actually. It's like a game of Monopoly. You don't really want Mediterranean Avenue, but you landed on it, and you might as well buy that so someone else can not take advantage of it.
Sure.
And so Pitcairn is buying up all these little random water sources that Paladin hasn't been buying for the Golden Toad.
There you go.
Which, by the way, I just tipped my hand there. Got a lot of Golden Toad energy in this one.
Definitely. I would agree.
Not even the best energy from the Golden Toad, because this is someone other than Gene writing this.
Right.
I absolutely love that Pitcairn is sleeping in the stable to keep an eye on Sam. You ever slept in a horse stable?
I can't say that I have. I read it as him trying to be a gentleman and not sleep in the same house as Susan and Helen.
Okay, I'm so worried about Sam.
Sally
this
and
is
Helen.
this is my read on the situation, because I'm just worried about Sam being hurt.
Hey, you know what? Could be both. So,
but yeah, I've done my share of stable sleeping, especially if you had a bunch of mares expected to foal just any time.
Oh wow, yeah.
And it's strangely peaceful, but you gotta pick a good spot or somebody is gonna nose you or nip you in the dead of night.
Noted. Okay.
Don't ask me how I know that, but trust me, it's a thing.
It is a thing. Noted. Okay.
Before we get into discussion, I do actually have a serious thing I need to borrow the soapbox back from you.
Here you are. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Wow, Earl, you're so tall.
That's the only time anyone's ever accused me of being that.
Same.
We have been putting Wrangler on blast for some ridiculously outmoded sexist writing in the past. I fear that here we are dealing with a giant dollop of ableism, and it is not a good look. Sally just needed to be unscared into walking again. Give me a break. And next thing you're going to tell me, it takes a couple of hours of sunlight to cure all depression. This reminds me of the second season of Next Gen, where there's a non-sequitur scene in sickbay in one episode where Dr. Pulaski is talking to Geordi about the sometimes painful side effects of the visor, and she mentions, hey, there's an untested procedure. We could grow you brand new eyes, but it's a one-way ticket, and regardless of the results, there would be no going back to the visor. Now, why that scene was there in 88, 89, is they were actually constructing an off-ramp for Geordi's differently abled representation, mainly because LeVar Burton was experiencing a lot of difficulty being able to navigate with the visor prop over his eyes.
Sure.
But they ended up not taking that exit because LeVar and the people making the show realized that doing so would be the Star Trek version of this terrible trope of the miracle cure. And that playing that card would minimize Geordi's struggles, but especially a lot of members of the audience who had latched onto Geordi as, this is my guy, he is like me.
Right.
Lucky for Geordi, he lives in a time when his condition is treated as an opportunity and not a liability. But back to this story, at the very least, if Sally was not dealing with actual physical paralysis, by the way, just simply voluntarily not using her muscles, even as a trauma response, that would lead to some muscle atrophy if she was not using those limbs at all. So it's not like she's going to be able to get up and walk.
Right.
She is going to need physical conditioning. That aside, she is clearly dealing with some severe post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you think that has completely resolved itself and she is now free of all ills, well, step right up, get in line if I got a deal for you. A miracle cure and some oceanfront property in Nebraska. The ableist stuff really bothered me. I'm sorry, it was just really icky. And you should all really be worried now, because that was a serious thing, and I didn't even bring it up in discussion. So what's discussion going to be about? Stay tuned.
Earl?
Yes?
Not real happy with the incident of the Magic Elixir.
I feel like there is something valuable here, but it's almost here by accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, it's not like the writer intended for this to be the message, but it's what I pulled out of it. But let me tell you, I had to reach into Pitcairn's saddlebag, pull out a rope, and tie it to the message, and start pulling it out of that well really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really bothered and by the way the Kiowa folks are represented in this. I've already said that. I'm doing my best to try to educate myself about how Indigenous folks are represented in the media. Last year, when my Marvel podcast covered Echo, we had the good fortune to have two really brilliant guests of Indigenous persuasion who have been really prominent in talking about Indigenous representation in comics and in media. Michael Shiashi, who literally wrote the book on Native Americans and comic books. Really great book, highly recommend. And then also we had Johnny J, who is the founder of A Tribe Called Geek and is part of several Indigenous activist organizations like Not Your Mascots. And getting to talk with both of them was really eye-opening for me, who knew very little, and to my white privilege had never considered just how are Indigenous folks represented in media. Well, one, it's not very much. And two, if it is, the only two shows I can think of right off the top of my head where the leads are Indigenous folks are Reservation Dogs and Echo. And all of those came out within the past 4 years.
Yeah, sorry, Chakotay doesn't really count.
No, he doesn't, which is sad.
Especially since that advisor that they had on retainer was up to some shady stuff.
Yeah. So now, because of those conversations and getting to know Michael and Johnny better, like I'm really grateful that I've gotten to have that experience. But two, like, it's made me so cognizant of, okay, here's an Indigenous person in this show or film I'm watching. How are they treated? How are they represented? Is this positive? Are we leaning into negative stereotypes? And so when literally every single mention of Kiowas in this episode is associated with alcohol and them being like drunk, or it implied that they're attacking Meeker because they want alcohol, I'm not okay with that. And I don't think Gene was either. And I'm really glad this never made it to air, because I'd be throwing something at the TV at UCLA if this happened.
We've talked about possible production difficulties shortening Wrangler's run from its original planned 8 weeks to more like 6 episodes airing in a 7-week span. I think that may have done us a big favor here.
Yeah.
Because not only is the Native American representation horrible in this, but we are back to boots and saddles, rolling out Native Americans as, we need a faceless, nameless, but ever-present bad guy.
Yeah.
We just need them to be the Klingons for this show. Even Klingons have gotten more in-depth exploration on American television at this point than Native Americans have.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Completely absurd. By the way, folks, if you have not watched Reservation Dogs and Echo, please do so. You are missing out. They are both excellent. But all that being said, that's not what we're getting here. This is hard, and I'm not happy with it. So I'm glad it didn't make it to air. Yes, production difficulties aside, kind of feel like they dodged a bullet. And you talking about comparing this with the Indigenous representation in Boots and Saddles, where there's a bunch of guys with dad bods in brownface. That's literally the two guys on ponyback in the opening of the episode.
Yeah, it feels like we would have gotten very similar central casting engines. I have a feeling you may be right about Gene having a hand in making sure this one was not a go. I mean, he has already written better Native Americans than this in this show, but he has written way better Native Americans in Have Gun Will Travel. And they have agency, and they have dignity. And to some degree, if you can even use this word in proximity to the fact that they have, in that time frame in American history, been driven away from their native lands, they do still maintain some level of sovereignty. Paladin or Pitcairn wander into their territory, he is respectful of them because he knows this is not his place. And he may not be welcome. And that he has to prove that he can be trusted.
Well, Earl, I'm going to step off the soapbox now. I think it's your turn. Please step right up.
Boy, are we keeping the soapbox warm this week, or what? I know we have already had our usual skillfully performed scene for this show, but I want to borrow a play from Norman's playbook and run some lines from the script, because I feel like the whole heart of it, whether intentionally or otherwise, from Edward Lakso's point of view, is in these lines.
Okay.
So we have a scene between Helen and Pitcairn here where they are debating the efficacy of the magic elixir.
I just heard what he said about the water. The old well. It's possible.
Helen, maybe I can understand him lying to himself, but not you.
Pitcairn, Sally can walk again. If she thinks it's because of whatever was in that bottle, you or nobody else is going to tell her different.
But down deep, it wasn't because of that.
I don't know anything except that my daughter is no longer a cripple, and I'll do anything to keep her that way.
And scene. That last line is really important. I'll do anything to keep her that way. Hello, enlightened future humans of the year 2025. Are you listening to that? That is the sound of someone given in to a heckin' bamboozle, as the cute dogs in the memes say. That is someone making the conscious decision in real time to go along with a fraud. Someone willingly deciding they are going to intentionally compartmentalize some information and some healthy skepticism because they are opting instead to go with what they want to be true. That is the sound of someone surrendering their right to do their own critical thinking. Get enough people to do that, you could turn an entire country, hell, the entire world upside down. And we are there right now. Because enough people have been convinced to surrender their critical thinking skills, put them in a box, shove them off to one side, and throw in their lot with the loudest carnival barker or Magic Elixir medicine show they can find. It brings to mind a couple of passages from, well, let's be honest, a far better story than this. That being George Orwell's 1984. To set up these two passages, Winston Smith is wrestling internally with the enormity of being a lone voice, one ant against the rest of the anthill. Quoting Orwell, "It was as though some huge force were pressing down upon you, something that penetrated inside your skull, battering against your brain, frightening you out of your beliefs, persuading you almost to deny the evidence of your senses. In the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 made 5, and you would have to believe it. It was inevitable that they should make that claim sooner or later. The logic of their position demanded it. Not merely the validity of experience, but the very existence of external reality was tacitly denied by their philosophy. The heresy of heresies was common sense, and what was terrifying was not that they would kill you for thinking otherwise, but that they might be right. For after all, how do we know that 2 and 2 make 4, or that the force of gravity works, or that the past is unchangeable? If both the past and the external world exist only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable, what then? The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. His heart sank as he thought of the enormous power arrayed against him, the ease with which any party intellectual would overthrow him in debate, the subtle arguments which he would not be able to understand, much less answer. And yet he was in the right. They were wrong, and he was right. The obvious, the silly, and the true had got to be defended. Truisms are true. Hold on to that. The solid world exists. Its laws do not change. Stones are hard. Water is wet. Objects unsupported fall toward the Earth's center. Now, I'm quoting Orwell here because I have already quoted Carl Sagan so many times on this podcast that I probably need to send him a check. Or at least his estate. You know, the bit about how once someone has fallen for the okie doke, you cannot claw them back into common sense reality because they have to be right. Ego forbids them from admitting they may have been wrong. Common sense and testable, observable reality go out the window. And then the next thing you know, common decency goes with it. Oh, man, I'm back to talking about 2025 again. Pitcairn has this to say once Jonathan Meeker has his very public realization about the well water and has to wave his gun around to convince the locals to back off of Meeker. It appears to me fools who believe miracles come in bottles just as much to blame as the fool who thinks he's selling them. See also the superstitious townfolk who sent Paladin after the monster of Moon Ridge. The solid world does exist. Gravity does work. The promises of the loudest carnival barker in the room will prove to be false soon enough, as they have been so many times before. So when presented with evidence of that, are you, dear listener, someone who is going to keep rejecting common sense and the evidence of their own eyes and ears? Or do you stick your fingers in your ears and hum really loud because you have to have your own custom-made bubble where there's even a slim possibility for you to be in the good graces of those who insist they're on the winning side and they will somehow vanquish observable reality? We are enduring that test right now in real time. I hope you studied up. Your whole grade is riding on it. Our whole grade, really. All the marbles are in play. And go. All right, Ashley, I am struck by the date on this script. Did you notice this? August 3rd, 1960. Episode at the Bar M premiered the next day. They were really counting on this whole videotape thing to make it possible to just crank out new episodes of this on the fly, weren't they?
You know, I not connected the dots with the date, but yeah, you're exactly right.
So this was going to be ready in under 8 weeks. Now, a filmed television workflow, your line producer would be laughing you out of the room and probably calling you unpleasant names. It really makes me wonder how much notice Gene had from green light to, oh hey, show premieres tonight, because some of the dates we noticed on scripts, some of the dates that show up on the tapes, make it all seem so thrown together at the last minute. I really kind of feel for the guy. And his pilot was written toward the end of 59, and it feels like, especially with what we learned in trivia last week with A Crisis Named Waveland, NBC and Paramount and Screen Gems just grabbed a random pilot off the slush pile, dusted it off, and said, oh, hey, Gene, remember this thing you wrote last year? It's a go, and we're doing it on tape, so your pre-production time period is less than 2 months. Given that some of our criticisms have included the sheer number of near-beer versions of Have Gun Will Travel scripts, or at least concepts, and some outrageous things that just didn't seem very Roddenberry, it's a small wonder if he had no time to really consider Pitcairn's path forward. I feel for Gene because that is not a setup that's conducive to someone consistently turning out their best work. So yeah, I feel like Pitcairn's been dining on a feast of Paladin's reheated leftovers on occasion.
Yeah, and I think that's really good to point out, Earl, because yeah, we've been a little rough on Pitcairn, like, oh, this is like Have Gun's greatest hits, but you know, if I only had a couple of months to do pre-production on a TV show, and you know, I'm having to use a new editing format to put the whole thing together with this videotape and filming, I'm gonna maybe cut my corners where I can. So I guess I can't really fault Gene too much for that.
Yeah, it seems like the deck was stacked against him.
Right. And, you know, the more I think about it, the more I understand, well, maybe this is why Gene didn't bother to mention this when, you know, we're putting the bio together.
Yeah, it feels like he was not given the chance to put his best work forward. Why claim it? Just drop it out in the desert somewhere and walk away from it.
Yeah.
And that's appropriate here because it feels like we're in the wrong show suddenly. The script says at the end of the cold open, as Pitcairn is going to go off and confront the Kiowas, Pitcairn seems a little puzzled and not particularly frightened. He arms himself and he charges into battle with nameless, faceless tribesmen who feel like a throwback to the generic Apaches of the week from Boots and Saddles, like we pointed out. The traveling conman medicine show is a trope that's been used in countless episodes of other westerns. I do like that Pitcairn finishes his journey through our heads standing up for reason and for common sense and for decency and for healthy skepticism and critical thinking skills. That seems like a very Roddenberry message, even though this is not a Gene script. I am not a huge fan of the giant icebergs of ableism and horrible Native American representation that go floating through the proceedings here. So this one is a mixed bag. It's a reliance on a lot of Western storytelling tropes that made me have a surprising realization. The reason Incident of the Magic Elixir is so out of place is because Gene Roddenberry, in creating Wrangler, did, despite all of the things that were ranged against him, create something that was pre-wired to deliver messages and morals in the guise of yet another exciting Western dust-up every week. Wrangler, at its best, is about something, whether it's questioning capital punishment or asking if a justice system can actually deliver any justice when the people at the top of the org chart are corrupt and inherently unjust. Wrangler, at its worst, consists of limp attempts to hump the legs of other Westerns. You're looking at these scripts and dragging them into the sunlight for all to hear about, warts and all, 65 years later, has been absolutely fascinating, and we've run into more jaw-dropping surprises with this show than with anything else we've covered. But we're not putting Pitcairn out to pasture just yet, because when you come back next week, Ashley, you will have seen Wrangler for yourself. Now, thankfully, not the Incident of the Magic Elixir, which never even went in front of a camera, but you will have seen the shows that were made.
Yeah, really looking forward to that, and really glad that Mission Log prodigy Charlene Schmidt's coming with me, so we're going to have a good time.
I'm excited to hear everyone's take on it. What did you find here? Anything good? Help me out, because I was struggling with this one, struggling all the way through this one.
I think what you've said, I don't think I can say it better than the passage you quoted from 1984. It is easy. I mean, we as humans, we think we're super smart and we know all the things all the time. But this idea of, I've said it about myself before, I love being right. I think it is the human condition to love being right. But I am not afraid to be wrong. And I think a lot of people are afraid to be wrong, which is how we get the incident of the Magic Elixir, where people are all like, well, this is clearly the cause of this girl being able to get up and walk again. You know, Pitcairn has to go to great lengths to exhibit evidence that says otherwise. So, and even then, people aren't real happy with him. They're like, nah, you just tear that homestead paper up.
Yeah, they are ready to inflict physical harm.
Yeah.
Because that's easier than being right. Well, I mean, keep in mind, apparently clinical trials in this time period consist of beating a guy to a pulp, so...
Right. Yeah.
Different time, different place, but still not a good look.
Yeah. I don't think I can say it better than George Orwell, you know. You've been told to disregard the evidence that you take in with your eyes and your ears. It's not okay.
It's not, but apparently, the times we are living through now are any indication, it must be really addictive. Special thanks to the Roddenberry Repertory Players. Our cast this week featured Cody Banning as Pitcairn and John Hall as Jonathan Meeker. Gene-ology is meant to be entertaining and informative, but it's also just the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the works of Gene Roddenberry. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Facebook at missionlogpod. And please remember, your comments could be used on future installments of Gene-ology. If you have any material that might be of interest to us that isn't already in the Roddenberry archive, drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and Mission Log Gene-ology is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment.
On the next Gene-ology, Char and Ashley's Wrangler Roundup. Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi.
We'll be back next week with more of your favorite programs. This concludes our broadcast day.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.